When you hear about that word like holistic psychiatrist, it kind
Mhm.
of triggers this, wait a second, how do those two words come together to one? Psychiatry, as most people know it, is kind of looking at the mental and psycho-emotional state and then providing a prescription to address that. Can you talk about your journey? Because obviously you learned the conventional side of it that led you into the holistic side of it.
Yeah, thank you. I would have rolled my eyes at the phrase holistic psychiatrist not too long ago, maybe 15 or 16 years ago. And when I was in my training, so I'm very conventionally trained. In fact, I was inspired to become a psychiatrist because I worked a suicide hotline in college and I volunteered there. And I was so unable to hold the distress of these callers in my literal nervous system
Mhm.
that I remember the feeling of like relief and a sense of safety and arguably control that I enjoyed when I could refer them to the mental health center, when I could refer them to psychiatrists, when I could be sure that somebody was going to medicate them soon and that the problem would be gone. Right. And here I am, and perhaps I helped some folks, but here I am thinking, I'm doing this altruistic thing, philanthropic thing. And when I look back on it, I'm like, wow, that was an early indication of how little tolerance I have for human suffering and how much I needed there to be a quick fix. So I say all of that just to illustrate how much of a believer in the quick fix, in the magic pill I was. And in my training in New York City, I worked on in many different hospitals, one of which was Bellevue Hospital, and there are 13 locked psych wards there. I had a lot of experience, you know, putting people into these spaces against their will and engaging in electroconvulsive therapy and things that the average person on the street would never imagine actually is going on in this moment in highly regarded prestigious hospital centers. So I was a total believer and got very good at polypharmacy, as it's called, which is like prescribing multiple medications at once. And I actually specialized in prescribing to pregnant and breastfeeding women because back in, 2008, 9, there was a burgeoning population of women who were on these meds, thinking about pregnancy or maybe unexpectedly pregnant, and there was no literature, no scientific evidence to suggest whether this was a bad thing or a good thing and what they should do. So I was one of the first 300 to really look at how to I say this like it's like a little snarky but also true. It's like how to scientifically justify continuing to prescribe to these women. That was my
Mhm.
specialty. So I combed the literature and I became aware of the registry. So registry is like if you have a bad outcome, you call the pharmaceutical company and you say this happened. It's a passive reporting system. And at the time that was primarily what we could offer women in terms of reassurance that there wasn't going to be some horrible outcome if they continued taking their meds. So it really wasn't until I was postpartum myself. So this was in my fellowship year where I continued to specialize in this very same population that, reflected my own demographic. And I was diagnosed with my first and only actually medical condition called Hashimoto's thyroiditis. I was diagnosed on a routine physical and I had this experience of cognitive dissonance where I had this like kind of voice come up that said, well, I'm not taking a prescription, like, and I'm certainly not taking one for the rest of my life. Like, where is the escape hatch? I got to get out of here. And of course, that was confusing, right? And potentially hypocritical because I was writing prescriptions every single day for women who were likely to stay on these meds for the rest of their lives. And at least that's what they would be encouraged to do. And so I ended up seeing a naturopath, which was extremely out of character, as you can imagine. And I don't know how I felt the hand of God kind of a thing, because it makes no rational sense that I made that choice. It was almost like a secret mission, because I simply didn't want to walk my prescription down to CVS every single month. I wasn't interested in doing that. So fast forward, the space of like 8 to 12 months, and I came off of thyroid hormone. I watched my labs go into the normal range in black and white on paper, and I became my teenage daughters would say, I was shook because I could not comprehend. So it's like another experience of dissonance. I couldn't comprehend how these simple changes that I had made largely dietarily could possibly have put this otherwise recidivistic illness into full remission. And you would think I would be like celebrating, right? Like, this is so exciting. I don't even need a prescription anymore. And instead, it began, a pretty archetypal heroine's journey where I was enraged. I felt the betrayal, of the bad mommy daddy. I felt like it was incumbent upon me to exact some sort of remedy. So I took out a $2 million life insurance policy. I collated, what would become thousands of hours of research into my first book, A Mind of Your Own. And I tapped into a grassroots movement of many, 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 patient advocates, if you want to call them that, who had been, they perceived, wronged by this system that promised them some sort of amelioration of their symptoms or some sort of treatment. What even is a treatment, right? And what they experienced instead was maybe worsening symptoms, ongoing symptoms, new symptoms. And I felt aligned with that, message, because I hadn't ever been told that lifestyle mattered, that nutrition mattered. I hadn't ever been told you could put a chronic illness into remission, literally never one time ever.